Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute privilege to be having a fireside chat with one of the legends in the cricketing arena, none other than Daryll Cullinan. He was called the uncut diamond from Kimberley at a very young age, scoring a century, and going on to make and break so many records. He's currently a sports commentator, a sports consultant, and a coach as well. So good evening, Daryl. It's an absolute pleasure to be having a chat with a childhood hero, and all the way from South Africa. How are you doing, sir?
Good evening, and thank you for your kind words. The honor is mine to have the opportunity to speak to you. I'm healthy and fairly good, so I'm just thankful to be healthy in this current situation. Thank you.
Daryl, so let's get down to business. I mean, we've been trying to have this chat for the past week or so. It's great to get in touch with you. But something that I've always wanted to, ask you was, looking back, do you regret not continuing squash as a career or a, you know,
Well, I came from, could I say, my father was an all round sportsman. I had an older brother, so whatever was available, summer and winter, and the school we went to was a very sporty school. So we played rugby, cricket, and then I started to play squash at about 13, 14, 15, and really enjoyed it. What I loved it most of all was that you don't need anybody to practice with, whereas cricket, you always kind of needed someone to practice with. But the opportunities really to leave South Africa was around cricket. One could pursue a career in England, and that's something that my father felt was the way to go. But I played a little bit after that. I had the most unbelievable experience. About a month and a half, I was in Pakistan, in Muzaffarabad, doing some commentary. And then, unbeknown to me, my co commentator picked up on someone in the crowd. And it was none other than someone I thought I'd never have the opportunity to ever meet, the legendary Jahangir Khan, the greatest squash player ever. I had
yeah.
to leave and go and have a photo taken, and opportunity to chat to him for about 5 or 10 minutes, understand how he used to train and his thoughts on sport today. And it was one of the great highlights of my whole life, and something that I will treasure for the rest of my
What was it like initially when you started playing cricket in South Africa? I mean, I've also heard the story where you used to pay 50 cents to watch VHS tapes of cricket matches. I've done my homework, but this
You
sounds like a
have.
very interesting story, which I think everyone would be, everyone would love to hear.
Well, you certainly have done your homework, because it's the first time in an interview I've ever been asked that. But put it into context. It was life for us in apartheid South Africa would have been 14, 15, 16, 17. And every year we had an English professional who would come from England. And that was where we were very lucky at Queen's College in Queenstown. We had that exposure. But when you tell people that in that time, there was no international cricket, we never got to see, we never got to watch, it was only domestic sport. So it was another world. We knew about it. We got cricket magazines and that. But I'll tell you this, the 5 day test match, the whole 5 days, to put it into context, that I saw was the first test match. I was 12th man. So before then, there was test cricket. I went to watch the odd day. So the English professional, going back, he would bring VHS tapes of the recent series in England. So we've a cricket society. His name was Bob Jones, and we paid 50 cents then, which was just really a gesture towards the Cricket Society. And we'd watch international cricket, and he would tell us more about it. So I love the story, because people still find it hard to believe that that's the type of isolation that we thought, well, this is our cricketing future, and that's all we can expect. But thanks for bringing it up. It brings back fond memories.
Pleasure. Always stories like that remain close to your heart, regardless where you play your cricket,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. No,
So
absolutely. It
back
was a good time.
when you Yeah, of course. So back when you made your debut in 1993 to playing your last test in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, uh, one coach that I think made a massive impact on that South African team was Bob Bogwood. What was it like being coached by such a legend?
Well, firstly, let's appreciate that when we got back into 92, our first trip that I went on, which was our second trip, was to Sri Lanka in 93. And there were 33, 34 test matches amongst us. If I'm wrong, it was maybe 35, 36, and Kepa Vessels had played 29 of those. So we were raw. We'd come out of a very good first class structure. That's why we were so competitive. But we were lacking that exposure as such and knowledge. And Bob, I think, first got appointed in about 94, 95, as soon as Hansie Cronje became captain. And he brought to us a whole new, fresh way of thinking and getting us to understand what we needed to be competitive. And he was also a very creative thinker, a wonderful growth mindset, which I think as a coach is a wonderful attribute to have. Otherwise, you stagnate and you won't last very long. Give an example, the 96 World Cup, that's Sri Lanka World Cup. We had toured Pakistan about 8 months before, and those conditions were foreign to us. And the first 15 overs, we were scoring around about 40, 50, thinking we're doing quite a battered. They were scoring above 100. So we needed to adapt, and we needed to sweep, and we needed to be able to play from the crease. So we went back, and he said, "Look, if we don't, we're not going to have a good World Cup." And our opening match was Pakistan in Karachi. And at 15 overs, we had 120. And that was our target after 15. So I think without Bob's thinking, his experience and knowledge and that growth mindset, we was always wanting to challenge the status quo and how we did things. I mean, he would be smiling today. He would talk to us in the late 90s about what we know today is the scoop shot. And we used to say, "Bob, but come on, you're being crazy. No one's ever going to play that." Now just about every second batsman can play it. He was way ahead of his time. So he came at an excellent time for South African cricket. He broadened our thinking and how we go about our game and how to be competitive at international level.
How much do you think, well, coaching has evolved since, back in the day, the techniques to the outlook and the approach to the game, especially uh, with T20 being introduced into the field and all those things. What do you think has changed? I mean, how much has coaching changed since
Sure.
when you used to play to now?
Well, dramatically, when I started playing first class cricket in the late 80s, you didn't have a coach. You had a team manager, and the captain really ran the show, and you kind of helped each other, and you relied on what you knew and watching others, and you tried things. So it was very much supportive friend. Coaching came along, and that's one of the things I've enjoyed about my career. I came from an absolute amateur, semi-amateur, semi-professional, full-time professional. But I think when we got to the mid-90s, I think the biggest introduction was sports science, and probably all sports to a large degree. It brought in a lot of people like specialist physio therapists, biokineticists, sports scientists. So they started to look at beyond just how to bat, bowl, and field, how the body and the dynamics and everything of that works together. So they had to educate themselves. And we were the leaders, mid 90s, late 90s under Bob Woolmer. And then we were the first side to travel with a as such was Paddy Upton. We were one of the first teams to have a full-time physiotherapist. Now today, some of them can have support staff. There's a specialist batting, bowling, spin coach, and all of that, fielding coach. And I think the last thing that has driven it is, yes, the sports science, the graded ones, the more traveling. They certainly play far more cricket than what we played. The introduction of another format, T20 cricket. And that has, and everyone thought it was a gimmick, has become quite a science now in terms of how to play it. So there's been a crossover of a lot of information, various individuals, which has made coaching, I think, very challenging, not only for the players, but the coaches. How do they seamlessly fit into each format, players, and keep their game together and performing at the highest level? So there's far more facets to it today. I think often you might find coaches perhaps hide behind all of this, not taking responsibility. But whilst that may be the case, I think as a player, the people that influence you most, and maybe a schoolboy coach, it was my instance as well. And if I was playing today, it would still be the same. He would still be someone that I leant on the most. It's still with all of this out there and that information out there, you still have to take full responsibility for your own game and see a coach as someone that can add value to your game, which you are constantly looking to be better at.
I mean, yeah, I absolutely agree with you because, see, our school day, I mean, our school side coach or our first coach is the one who's probably going to make us or break us. Or, at the end of the day, you can have the best coaches when you go into the international level, but your first coach, how he puts that discipline, the respect towards game, and to understand what cricket really is. I suppose it's the first coach that's going to basically give you all that confidence to be able to go into the future and make a international player out of yourself. Um, Having said that, I mean, right now I see a lot of teams carrying an equal amount of support staff as opposed to the players going into big tournaments such as the World Cup and all that. But now, let's just quickly touch on Coach, which you signed up with. Uh, how do you think Coach, the app or the platform, coaching platform, how do you think that is going to contribute to international teams or club teams or university teams? Being a coach yourself, Daryl, how much has it helped you and what convinced you to try it out?
Mm. Well, I was immediately struck by the cool look of the platform, being browser based. It's very dynamic, which means you can certainly add content very quickly and regularly. So that Netflix streaming style, video based, which makes it so much easier for the user to flick through their choice of what they want to see, assignments, documents, and then importantly, it's an excellent academy tool where you can manage your academy. So much around all of this is now data. This is the big thing in all coaching, whatever you're using, capturing analysis, analyzing, capturing data about players, where they are, who they are, keeping a record of that. But we're in the information age, so something that's online, that's mobile friendly. And the important thing for me, it had to be mobile friendly and it had to be easy to use. So that I felt with the AI aspect to it as well makes it knowledge that's there in your at your fingertips, and it's easy to access, and it's relevant, and it takes you to what you want to know instead of something that's app based. You then would have often download issues, crashing, and that type of thing. So it's about taking the game in a manner which is easy for a cricketer wherever he is or coach wherever he is to be able to access that information quickly, and video format is the easiest way, and that's how people like to consume that content. So when you say, well, what attracted me to it was exactly that, with the biggest reason being that anyone, as long as they got connectivity and there's content, can access it anywhere in the world. And essentially you need a smartphone, and it's a very intuitive, simple but beautiful, but it gets to the point. So we can spread knowledge, we can spread wisdom too. Talking about coach, it's easy to teach knowledge. So we can provide a lot of knowledge that way. But I think where we want to be different is to bring in the wisdom. Now, you can't teach that. That's many, many years of cricket experience. I'd like to think that I would fall into that category. I've had to really, over the last 20 years, work very hard on my cricket knowledge as such. So you can offer the full package. But as a platform, I have not seen anything like it yet. And I think it's certainly going to be a trend setter and a setter in terms of the benchmark of what can happen out there. And the beauty of it, it's flexible. You can use it across various sports. It's also used in the educational arena. I think the guys have done a pretty good job in making it so user friendly. So I just had to be part of it, and I reached out to the guys head coach up and said, I really like this. Can I be involved? And they said yes.
And we are definitely thrilled to have you on board as well, Daryl. Uh, Another question that I've been trying to ask you is, having shared the dressing room with legends such as Hansie Cronje, Johnny Rhodes, Herschel Gibbs, Gary Kirsten, what was it like? What was the vibe like back in the day when you would, you know, ideally walk into the stadium, check into your dressing room? I'm sure you always had your favorite spot wherever you played. So, what was it like?
Well, we came, as I said earlier, from nowhere. We came into it all inexperienced, raw. We hadn't traveled. We hadn't been part of inter cricket. So it was very exciting to us. And I think the primary goal we all had was to get South Africa back in world cricket doing well, which I no doubt we achieved. But we had a lot of fun. I don't know if we could have had the same fun today. Just remember, I mean, cell phones weren't really around. Social media was definitely not around. So I'd like to think that we played hard. We enjoyed our cricket and we had a lot of fun. And each day brought new experiences. I don't think the guys have any different experiences today. You've got different characters, all in their own right. Let's remember, any sporting team at that level, you all haven't chosen to be together. You've come together through selection and performance. So you really have to make it work. And I think that's still relevant today. But it was great to see. I mean, Hansie was an amazing captain. I mean, John T. Rhodes influenced fielding in that era, and that influence still, he carries that influence today. Now I see in terms of his coaching. But a few of them, like Gary and I, played at school cricket together. Allan Donald, we played school cricket together. So it was a great thrill for us to eventually go around the world. But it was good time. I wouldn't change them for the times today, even for all the money, because I doubt the guys today have the fun that we had.
And who was your favorite to face out of the two fast bowlers I could think of? Shaun Pollock or Daryl? Shaun Pollock or Allan Donald in the nets?
Well, Alan was quick. He was consistently quick. So Sean was a different type of bowler. As a youngster, he had genuine pace. Then he settled into being that absolute master at line and length and working you over. But for raw pace, Alan, no, when you didn't want to really get in the nets when Alan was running in, and then Bob Woolmer might have thrown him a hard new ball. So then it was just pure survival. You just wanted to get out of there in one piece. And the best you could try and do is just not get out to him. Not getting out to him was the best achievement you could have. But I played a lot of first class cricket against him. And he was just consistently quick from the first ball to the last ball or his last spell of the day.
Yeah, I can remember him watching. I remember watching him a couple of times. It's just like he'll bowl the first ball the same pace, and at the end of his 10th over,
Yes.
right, he's the same pace, and that the charisma he had when he had that ball in his hand, it's just amazing. And as you said, Shaun Pollock, another guy in Sri Lanka, Shamin Davas, pretty much had the same sort of characteristics.
Yes.
It's all about line and length,
Yes.
and yeah, amazing. Uh, so, when you were 16, you were the youngest to score a century. When you did that, did you ever think that you'll be a part of this South African dream team back in the 90s?
No, this goes back to my earlier thoughts on being in isolation. That stage, there was no thought. If you wanted to pursue cricket, you played domestically, or you went and played in England. They were still, you could play as a South African. And I debuted at 26 against India, January, I think the year was 93. At 25, a year before, I was then after five, I got my 100, I was 16. That was 1983. So I'd had 7, 8 years of first class cricket, which was a fair amount. And I thought, well, I need to start looking for a job now. It was getting to that stage. I'd studied. So we were amateurs, that you didn't make a living playing cricket. And then within a year, things changed. Things changed. Well, 91, it was the end of the apartheid era. And with that, we still then, when are we going to get back into international cricket? And that happened overnight with India accepting us, and away we went. Then suddenly it was, wow, So you get picked and then you play. And then by 96, 97, we were full time contracted international cricketers. But no, there was no chance. You didn't really know of an outside world or anything different. And that was where we had rebel tours. So that provided the present lot. Played against Gatting's England side, and you thought, well, that's your lot, that's your career, and you're none the wiser. So I look back on my career and I think of some of the greatest cricketers I've ever seen and played with and against. Their careers coincided exactly with those isolation years, and I can reel off names that the world would not have seen too many better cricketers. So I'm grateful for the fact that I still had a good and an opportunity. So I'm not for a single moment envious of any cricketer today, because I just think of guys I played with who were they were good few, were far better cricketers than I was. You got no opportunity.
I suppose resilience matters as well. I mean, those are the actual trying times. I mean, we say that we don't have any matches now, tournaments being put off due to travel restrictions and quarantine. But I mean, to really stick in there and concentrate on your game, do
Mm.
better for 8 long years, I would call that resilience. And talking about resilience, that you've had so many good innings played by yourself, but that one particular innings, the 94 against England, with Devon Markham sending down Scud missiles at you, and also the only batsman to not get out of Devon Markham. What was it like?
Well, I got selected on that tour. I wasn't expecting to go. We had toured Australia 3, 4 months before, and I'd had a horrendous time against War, never got a test run. So I was like, whoa, am I going to get another chance? So I remember I was driving back from somewhere. I was in the middle of nowhere. I knew the team was going to be announced at 3 o'clock. So I switched the radio on in my car, and I heard that I was going. So the first test I didn't play. And then this was the beauty of touring England in those days, because you played 3 or 4 warm-up games, and then in between, I think it was a 3-match series. We played 2 games between each test match. So I played that. This was the last test match. So I'd got about 7 or 8 consecutive 50s, and then got to play in the last test. So I was really, really determined to play well. And I remember getting out there, and he was bowling very quickly. And again, it was sustained pace. If you speak to those with him, he had those days in he was the quickest, and he had a very round arm. So it could be very difficult to pick him up initially. But it was sheer guts then, excuse me, and determination to do well that got me through that day. And yeah, 94, perhaps it could have been 100. But that innings bought me a couple of more tours. So I'm very, very grateful. But that was just absolute adrenaline and a willingness and a want to do well.
Yeah, watching that innings after so long. I mean, I just recently watched it on YouTube. I mean, this guy was sheer pace and lethal, lethal pace. Uh, so kudos to
Yeah.
that innings. I think that would be better than any 100 you've played, no doubt.
Yeah, because you were the way he was bowling, it was a good wicket. It was a quick wicket, which the Oval had a reputation for. That when it was really good and the carry was good. So it was also just about sheer survival. But it's innings like that is an absolute rush. That's your high as a batsman, because you're not getting too consumed about, well, where should I play? Yeah, there. It's just pure survival. And relying on instinct and talent to get you out of trouble, or play the right sort of shot. But if you were going to be intimidated, And I saw some of the so-called tough guys of South African cricket that day. I saw one of them just give it up and get the hell out of there. So it was just one of those type of days.
Daryl, how has your approach to coaching changed during these times? I mean, uh, with so many restrictions in place, right? How important do you think player management is at this point, and how have you approached or how have you adapted to these changes which are currently going on?
Well, Vishka, I've really the last 20 years, I found my coaching niche to my shock and surprise with the younger kids. I've never really had aspirations of coaching at the highest level, and that's where I've got my most enjoyment. The aspect of player management, if I just think of international cricket and the players there, it's very important. I think not only their workload, but the mental rest. I'm very thrilled that mental health has become such an issue now, and I think it's been long overdue. And it's good to see that of the game in all sport. But I'm very thrilled to see in cricket that that's starting to now be respected, and I hope it continues and goes from strength to strength. The In terms of coaching, working with young cricketers, it definitely has changed my outlook. And I may not have coached at the highest level, but I firmly believe as a coach, you've got to earn your stripes. I've seen too many great cricketers fail miserably, but I'd love to say to them, come and coach with me 5, 6, 7 year olds, because you need that experience. So my whole philosophy, I've approached it, is up tremendously from being quite rigid, set in my ways about this is the only way you play cricket, to one today of exactly the opposite. And I think you need that because you've got critical periods in a young cricketer's life where they need to have certain basics in place. But again, handling you can call working with young kids. There's also a factor player management, and it's a great challenge. Probably the biggest challenge in coaching. It's a science. It's not something you can turn on or turn off. And I think the experience you gain will certainly stand you in good stead. The more you do of it, the better you'll become. But it is a different world today, and I think the biggest impact has been science and obviously T20 cricket. So I found not many kids want to be caught up in the longer forms of the game. T20 is what they want to do, and with that has brought different coaching challenges.
Moving slightly away from cricket, like I suppose this also falls into the point where you discuss player management. Social media has been a big part in many cricketers these days. Uh, Back in the day, you didn't have social media. The only
Mm.
backlash or the only criticism you would get is probably from a journalist during a presser, or they'll probably boo you at a ground, probably say something nasty when you're walking past them back into the dressing room or taking a drinks round or whatever. Um, but nowadays, players get so affected; they get bombarded with so many criticism, so much of criticism rather, um, through social media, and they still continue to be active on social media. How do you suppose a player would adjust him or herself rather, uh, to being to striking the right balance between sports and social media?
Yes, it's a tough one because it appears to me that being having a social media presence, a personality, being a brand, giving your sponsors exposure, having an opinion, it seems to be that a lot of cricketers have to do today. But ultimately, whether it was my time and a journalist, they were quite powerful because they had pen in hand and people read newspapers. So they could quite drastically influence your career if they didn't like you or they had an ego where they felt you needed to stroke it to get something nice out of them. There's a good few of those around. But social media today, it's given everyone and anyone an opportunity, whether you know them or they're anonymous, to to say something. And that's just the nature of it. It's just some people are just going to have nothing good to say simply because that's the way they are. And they'll find a reason to say anything good. My advice would be look, you've got to develop a thick skin very, very quickly. See it for what it is and be particularly careful where you're seeing what you do and what you want to expose yourself to. You've made the decision. Don't blame anybody else to be on social media. So you've got to be pretty sure in your own mind how you handle it. I don't think it warrants participation at all. And sponsors that are pressing you, other commitments to have a presence, I don't see that you need to comply with that unless you need the money and you're quite happy to be controversial, quite happy to be out there and be heard. But it's a dangerous tool, and I don't think it ultimately achieves anything because we don't really know if you being on social media what it actually does for your sponsors or not. One can always doubt the numbers that you read and the influence supposedly that you have. I mean, that's also questionable. If you can stay off it, stay out of it, the better. Play your game and do what you need to do. And I think that's pretty much. I think a person that's handled it very well, been MS Dhoni throughout his career. He's on Twitter. He has an Instagram presence. His management company through his academies. He gets that sort of exposure, but you'll never see him getting involved in anything he doesn't need to. But then some love the attention. You get a lot of cricketers that just simply love the attention, good or bad, and they thrive off it. Well, if they do or they don't. So good luck to you. I don't really have anything more to say on that side. I'm just glad it wasn't around when we played.
Made life much easier, didn't it?
It is.
So, Daryl, also this social media aspect, I'm just touching on it because it has become a big part of not just cricketers, but most sports personalities nowadays. Like you said, the sponsors approach them, and it's all about the exposure of that particular brand, doing justice to their sponsors, or all those things. But it does take a certain toll on a player's mental or mindset. How do you reckon they absorb this criticism, not take things personally, and then just switch off when you walk into the ground? When you walk into that, when you walk past the boundary, you just have to forget all sorts of social media and then just focus on the game. But how much criticism can a player absorb? I mean, you've played the game at the highest level in a very devastating stage at one point. But like, how would you deal with it?
Well, I think you need to be quite clear about where you see it and the role that it performs. I mean, ultimately, there's you. There's you, the individual, and what matters to you. What happens around you, like social media, shouldn't determine who you are. So you've got to be very clear about that. I think what also helps is you can't take yourself too seriously, because then you're going to be quite sensitive to what gets said about you out there and how much exposure you're giving yourself. I mean, I was quite a sensitive person. I didn't like criticism. Eventually, I just realized that see it for what it is. So, if you're quite thick skinned, it definitely helps and you're able to switch on and switch off. I think ultimately, none of that defines who you are. And if you're confident in that and the rest is just playtime and you're not going to take it too seriously, then I think you're fine. But that's a particular strong mindset. If you've got it or you eventually grow into it, it does help. But I don't, it's easy to say, oh, I don't listen to it. Everyone, how many cricketers I used to see first thing in the morning, you'd see them down at breakfast or and find out what did they say about me in yesterday's paper. I think that's human nature. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be liked. But I think ultimately it does take a toll on you. I've never met too many or know of too many. I think it's more bravado. It doesn't bother me. We all intrinsically want to be liked and loved. So you've got to develop a very strong, I think, mental side to how you can deal with not only cricket but sport in today's world.
And during these trying times, Daryl, what's your advice to coaches nowadays? I mean, it's really tough given the travel restrictions, like I said earlier, and also
Mm.
connectivity in certain places, right? So, what is your advice to a coach? What would you say for a person to be at the top of their game?
Well, I think with restrict travel today, it is different because it's these guys living. In our time, it wasn't really our living. It wasn't. It wasn't. So the pressure's on them more. The less they obviously play, it does limit those opportunities. So is a definite added pressure. I think the bio bubble is a problem. It definitely leads to mental fatigue. I know I would have struggled with it. You can argue, but these guys earn so much money, it's a small sacrifice to pay. But definitely, I don't necessarily believe that. Ultimately, there are people, and some like to get out, be different. And being confined so long, it's going to impact on guys, it's going to impact on their game. Guys and, girls as well, you're traveling. So, how do you stay fresh mentally and to keep yourself going? I think is tough. You can play so much table tennis, you can play so much video games. So I hope that these issues get resolved quickly, so guys can lead a bit of a normal life. Maybe the answer that they need to rotate squads more so people can stay fresh. But yes, as a coach, you have your challenges too. You're responsible to a large degree for your team and their well-being. But I hope in the process they have got strong outside interests. I think that could be something that could help you pass the time. They have strong outsides, and I'm not talking about video games and that, but whether it's in study, whether it's in uh, interest in common, perhaps a business interest or an opportunity to develop themselves mentally, doing some online courses, and think about, well, what am I going to do beyond cricket? Maybe they can start sowing the seeds for it now. But I'm just thankful that I don't have to put up with it. And I think the guys are doing an incredible job to still be out there performing to their best. 'Cause it's got to be taking its toll for sure. And we've seen it.
Also, being in touch with the players is another important thing that I see. Always talking to the players to see if they, follow the coaching instructions, if they stick to the diet, all those things, because now it's not as easy as it was back in the day. So another thing I believe is that it's best to always speak to the players on a very unofficial basis, just to understand the player's mindset. And if you feel like the player is being distracted, just to put him back on track and say, hey, here's the path, you were just stepping out of line. So I guess communication
Yeah, well, I
is
think
also an important actually.
it's hugely important. And I'm sure teams rely on a sports psychologist, a mentor. I would think that the players would have that in place already. So that outside support, and the coach would need it as well. Him and his staff would need it as well.
Daryl, the T20 World Cup is just around the corner, and being an impact player yourself, impact approach to the game, how much would you have loved to play T20 cricket?
I would love to have if it would have been great. Perhaps if IPL contract for 5 years would have been lovely. But I played years, yeah, my last 2 seasons, a bit of T20 cricket. And I enjoyed it simply because it wasn't at that stage in my career, it wasn't long cricket as such, but it was quick cricket. We were having to finish our overs in an hour 20 tops. We were under those sort of limits. And the IPL is just dragging on. It's becoming too long now, slow, and they're not under time pressure and the breaks. So that's losing, for me, it's losing a bit of that appeal. But I'd love to have simply for that. And it's dynamic, it's about speed, it's about strength, it's about power, it's about explosiveness. We've seen some unbelievable fielding. No, definitely. If you asked me today, you played, your focus was red ball cricket. You got good at that, and then you kind of really worked on your one day game. Now the focus is white ball cricket, and you're trying to make, uh, red ball players out of white ball players, and it's fully understandable. I was starting my career now, I'd make sure that I had a good T20 game probably before test game. And that's how it's happening, and that's how young players see it. That's what they want to do most of all.
And what's your take on having different squads for different formats? I mean, just to touch base on a particular series last year which Sri Lanka played, was it last year or this year? Sri Lanka had the Lankan Premier, the Sri Lanka Premier League, which is the T20 league in Sri Lanka. So all the contracted players who played the T20 series had to go into a test series, and the first test which they played as if it was a T20. So how
Yeah.
important do you think that it is to have different squads, or do you think it's necessary to have different squads for each format, or as a professional cricketer, should you be able to just adapt and understand what game you're playing and what your approach is when you just walk into the field?
Well, that's the challenge today for a coach and a player to just seamlessly, mentally, and your game technically sort of float between if you play T20 today, 50 over tomorrow, and then asked to be back for 6 hours on the third day in a test match. We've seen very few, particularly on the batting side, are able to adjust. On the bowling side, test bowling, not that I bowl in test cricket, but it's a different mindset. And we've seen even the very best player. The only guy that I've seen do it effortlessly has been AB de Villiers. But we've seen the rest of them have this after T20 going into test match. So your rhythm, your mindset, you're geared up technically being tighter, having to get behind the ball more. So I don't see enough of that happening. So yes, I think we need to start going specialist squads. I don't think your test batters, any of them should be playing T20 cricket, unless you've got an AB de Villiers. But with T20 cricket and the money that's there, how are you going to tell a guy, listen, I'm only selecting Test cricket? When he could very well play T20 cricket, he's going to say, well, okay, I might just do it to get the badge. But then ultimately, I won't give you the many years. And we've seen it happen already because I want to spend my last 5, 6 years making as much money as you can. But it's definitely impacting. And we see it when the ball's moving around, swinging off the pitch. The guys today battle. And there's some strange coaching ideas about how to play all three, which I question as well. But if you're going to, and I think it's the bigger thing with regard to Test cricket, if you're going to get guys take it very seriously, I'm not talking those who just pay it lip service simply because they want to be seen and heard saying all the nice things about Test cricket. I mean, Test cricket, as far as I'm concerned, it's struggling to stay alive. I'm not too sure it can continue over 5 days. I'm pro playing 4 days and looking to revamp it. So the challenge then is how do you move effortlessly between all three. So yes, I'd be in favour of different squads, but I don't think players are going to like it.
So, last couple of questions, Daryl, before I let you go. Test,
Yes.
ODIs, or T20s, what is your cup of tea? What do you think is the what do you think really defines cricket as a game?
Well, I'm sort of contradicting myself here, but I mean, Test cricket does because it ultimately finds you out. It ultimately will expose your game if you play long enough, and it's the ultimate challenge. With whatever you do, whatever you're doing, you got to bring out your full skill set, and it will expose your frailties as well. T20, because I've spent 20 years working with young kids, it's really helped and changed the game. I don't think cricket for kids we've got it right. Sadly for me, I realized after 4 or 5 years, it's a boring game. There's nothing the way that it's structured that really appeals to young kids. So you can make it 100 overs, call it T20, call it what you want to. It's not really, particularly amongst boys, getting them to love cricket more and play more. It's not my opinion. Just look at the stats. So I think that's where the biggest work and where we need to be bold enough to. I don't think personally that kids need to play hardball cricket till they're 12. I don't see the need. I think it'll improve their game if they're not. That's my radical views on it. But T20 is where the strength is going, and ultimately that's how we'll see mostly cricket being played.
Daryl, just before I go, I have the opportunity to bowl a bounce at you. Who do you reckon is the greatest spin bowler
You,
of all time?
are you going to bowl me a bouncer? Well, obviously you're waiting for me to say it's Shane Warne. I mean, I never do an interview without that being asked. But well, in my defence, people don't give me credit. My one-day record against him in Australia is pretty good. I think I won that battle. But getting out to the flipper and getting out 4 times to him in test matches, everyone kind of has made a real meal of that. But in saying all of that, Lutheran was, if you take his career, he got more wickets. He single-handedly bowled teams out. He was, Warner had the likes of McGrath at the other end. He had a useful pace attack around him. But Murray bowled many more overs all around the world, and he did it single-handedly. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I mean, obviously Warren was the more dynamic. Being Australian, they love to champion their own players, but I would. I mean, Murray, the guys who played him in the second half, I got to play against him in his first game for Sri Lanka, which was a one-day. I mean, the way that he spun the ball was unbelievable. Then he had to straighten up. I can call it. He had to straighten up his arm, but then he developed the Dusra, which is bowling our time. But I would. It's a tough one between the two of them, but for sheer volume of overs, single-handedly taking wickets around the world, I would go with Muralitharan. And Kumble was pretty good as well. But Murray, for me, gets the nod.
Thanks a lot, Daryl. It's been a pleasure
Great
having a
pleasure.
chat with you. And thank you so much for the insight, and thank you so much for the advice you've given all the coaches. And for a cricket lover like me, what I can still learn from a legend like you is immense. So thank you so much for
Great pleasure.
spending time with us. And we'll definitely get in touch with you. Hope you enjoy using Coach. And yes, all the best in all your
Absolutely.
future endeavors. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Rabishka. It's a great pleasure. Bye.
Bye bye. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Daryll Cullinan, the South African legend, great batsman, great cricketer, great coach, and also a renowned commentator. And a special thank you goes out to the Papare team for giving us this opportunity to telecast this interview with the cricketing legend Daryll Cullinan and the coach team as well. So until we meet again, thank you so much once again to the team Papare. Keep watching. All the best. Stay safe. Bye bye.
Stay on the ball with the Papare Sports News Alerts. Don't miss out on what's happening in the world of sport. Type sports and send to 678 to register. 30 rupees per month. Conditions apply.